Don't touch anything inside that watch. The security chief warned through the speaker before Marcus Reed had even lifted its cracked back plate. The stalled elevator glowed red around him as Evelyn Whitmore pressed one hand to her throat, fighting for air. Marcus held her father's broken watch beneath his work light, its dark leather strap hanging over his fingers, while a tiny red waveform flickered between the gears. "I don't need to know who you are to know you can't breathe," he said. Then a dead man's voice whispered, "Evelyn, do not sign." 3 hours earlier, the faint smell of machine oil had followed Marcus through the service corridor beneath Whitmore Tower. Fluorescent lights hummed above the gray concrete floor, and the brass elevator key at his belt tapped softly against his tool pouch with every step. It was the same key he had carried for 7 years, polished smooth where his thumb rested when he was thinking. At 39, Marcus had learned to trust small sounds. Loose relays clicked differently from failing ones. Worn bearings complained before they seized. People did too, though they were harder to repair. He stopped outside elevator 6 when he heard a thin electrical tick behind the closed doors. It came once, then disappeared beneath the low vibration of the cables. The control panel showed no fault. Marcus frowned, opened his maintenance tablet, and found nothing unusual except a brief voltage fluctuation logged at 8:17 that morning. Before he could inspect it, the executive call light flashed. Someone on the upper floors had summoned the car. Marcus stepped inside with his brown leather tool roll tucked under one arm. On the 42nd floor, a white woman in a charcoal coat entered without looking at him. She carried no briefcase, only an old wristwatch cupped in both hands. Its glass was split by a narrow diagonal crack. The leather strap had been repaired twice with dark thread. She stood rigidly near the mirrored wall, as if the small object weighed more than anything else she owned. Marcus pressed the lobby button. The elevator began descending. 36, it shuddered. 34, the lights went black. The emergency. Lamps washed the car in red as it dropped half a floor and stopped hard enough to throw the woman against the wall. Marcus locked the safety brake and reached toward her, but she recoiled. "Stay back." Her breath came too fast. The watch slipped from her hand and struck the rubber floor. Marcus knelt without touching her. "Look at the light above the door. Breathe in while it flashes. Out when it goes dark." She tried, failed, then tried again. He placed his folded work jacket behind her shoulders so the steel wall would not cut into her back. Only then did he pick up the watch. The second hand was frozen. The minute hand pointed to 8:17. From inside the mechanical case came a faint electric scratching, too regular to be friction. "That shouldn't be there," Marcus murmured. "What?" "An electrical pulse. This is a mechanical movement." Her eyes locked on the watch. "It belonged to my father." The words were quiet, but something in them tightened the air. "He died 6 weeks ago." It stopped the same night. Marcus turned the watch beneath his penlight. The back plate showed 2 tiny marks made by a specialized opener, not damage from the fall. Someone had hidden something beneath it and sealed it carefully. The security speaker cracked alive. Grant Mercer's voice arrived polished and firm. "Technician Reed, stabilize the car and wait for extraction. Do not activate anything inside that case." Marcus looked up slowly. He had not reported an internal device. He had not even said the watch was open. Across from him, the woman stopped fighting for breath long enough to stare at the speaker. Marcus lowered his eyes to the brass key at his belt, then to the watch frozen at 8:17. Grant had not guessed. He already knew. Marcus kept his eyes on the speaker. "How do you know there's something inside it?" No answer came. Only the soft hiss of an open channel, then a click as Grant disconnected. Across the elevator, Evelyn looked from Marcus to the cracked watch in his hand. Her breathing steadier now, but her face drained of color. Before either of them could speak, metal groaned above the ceiling. The rescue team forced the outer doors apart, exposing a narrow strip of the marble lobby several feet above them. Cold white light spilled into the red elevator car. Marcus secured the watch inside his folded jacket before helping Evelyn step onto the maintenance platform. He climbed out last. Grant Mercer was waiting beside for uniformed guards, his silver tie perfectly centered beneath his collar. Behind them, employees had gathered near the glass security gates, pretending to study their phones while watching everything. 9-year-old Nia Reed stood among them with her red backpack pressed against her chest. She had come straight from school to wait for Marcus's shift to end. The moment she saw him, her face brightened. Then she noticed the guards. "Dad, stay where you are, baby. Did you fix it?"
I'm okay.
Marcus kept his voice level. The lobby smelled of polished stone, expensive coffee, and the faint burnt metal odor drifting from the stalled elevator. Grant stepped between Marcus and his daughter. "Place your hands against the glass, Mr. Reed." "For what reason?" "This is a precaution." Grant's tone remained almost gentle, the voice of a man explaining policy to someone he had already decided would obey. "You opened private property belonging to an executive passenger without authorization." Marcus glanced at Evelyn. She stood a few feet away, still holding his work jacket around her shoulders. Her fingers closed over the fabric as if she had only just realized it belonged to him. "She couldn't breathe," Marcus said, "and the watch was overheating." "You are an elevator technician," Grant replied, "not a jeweler, not an audio specialist. Your responsibility was the car." One guard removed Marcus's leather tool roll. Another unclipped the brass elevator key from his belt and placed it in a clear plastic tray. The small sound it made against the hard surface carried farther than it should have. Nia moved toward the security line. A receptionist caught her gently by the shoulder. "You need to wait over here, sweetheart. That's my dad." "I know. The adults are handling it." Nia looked through the glass at Marcus, confused rather than frightened. He turned enough for her to see his face. "Eyes on me, baby. I'm still right here." She nodded and held her backpack tighter. Marcus placed his palms against the glass without forcing the guards to touch him. He could feel dozens of eyes moving over his faded work shirt, scuffed boots, and worn tool belt. Two men near the coffee stand whispered that maintenance workers had access to every executive floor. A woman murmured that people did desperate things when they needed money. No one asked how Marcus had kept the elevator from dropping farther. No one asked why Evelyn was still wearing his jacket. Julian Cross entered the lobby without hurry, carrying a slim leather portfolio. His gray hair was neatly combed, his expression lined with practiced concern. "Evelyn, thank God." He approached her first, lowering his voice as though protecting her from a public scene he had not created. "You've been through a serious shock. Let's get you upstairs and have the physician document what happened." "The watch spoke," Evelyn said. Julian paused for less than a second. "Trauma can distort sound. It said my name, and this employee had the watch open in his hands." He turned toward Marcus with a sympathetic expression that never reached his eyes. "Mr. Reed, I'm sure you believed you were helping, but intention does not erase procedure." A guard placed the cracked watch inside a transparent evidence pouch. His hands still pointed to 817. Julian watched the seal close, then opened his portfolio. On top lay a transfer of authority form bearing Evelyn's name and that morning's date. "This can wait," Evelyn said. "Of course," Julian replied. "We only prepared it in case your condition made immediate continuity necessary." Her eyes settled on the completed signature tabs. The forms had not been printed after the elevator stopped. Grant lifted the evidence pouch and turned toward the security corridor. "We'll have the voice module examined internally." Marcus looked at him. Evelyn did too. The lobby seemed to narrow around those two words. No one had told Julian or Grant that the device inside the watch was a voice module. So why had both men already known exactly what to call it? The words voice module hung in the marble lobby long after Grant stopped speaking. Marcus watched Evelyn's eyes move from the sealed watch to Julian's prepared documents. But before she could ask another question, Grant stepped closer and lowered his voice. "We need to continue this in private. Then preserve the watch. Security has a procedure. That procedure includes a magnetic scanner," Marcus said. Grant's expression remained professional, almost patient. as though Marcus were a difficult employee slowing down an ordinary workday. Behind the glass gates, Nia stood with both hands wrapped around the straps of her red backpack, her eyes fixed on her father's empty belt where the brass key had been. Marcus was led into a security interview room that smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. A fluorescent panel buzzed above a gray metal table. Through the window, he could see the evidence pouch resting on a rolling cart beside the scanner, the cracked watch still frozen at 8:17. Julian entered carrying the leather portfolio. He closed the door gently and placed 3 things on the table: a termination agreement, a confidentiality clause, and a cashier's check equal to 6 months of Marcus's wages. "No one wants to make this harder than it needs to be," Julian said. "You have a daughter waiting outside. You have bills. Sign this, acknowledge that you accidentally damaged the watch, and the company will decline to pursue criminal charges." Marcus looked at the check. 6 months of rent. 6 months of groceries. Enough to replace the tires on his 14-year-old sedan and pay the balance on Nia's after-school program. For one quiet second, he imagined taking her home, heating can soup, and pretending the day had ended differently. Then he noticed the line near the bottom of the agreement requiring him to waive any request for preservation of electronic records connected to the incident. Outside the room, a security officer lifted the evidence pouch toward the scanner. Marcus stood. "Stop him." Julian did not turn around. "Sit down, Mr. Reed. That field can damage the capsule. You are not in a position to give orders. Then call someone who is." Grant entered before Marcus could reach the door. His hands settled. Near his belt, not threatening, just reminding Marcus which man the building expected to obey. "There may not be anything left to erase," Grant said. The sentence was quiet. Too quiet. Marcus looked past him at the watch. If the recording disappeared, the only object tying him to the accusation would become a broken heirloom in his hands. The damage might even help him. There would be less to investigate, less to prove, less reason for anyone to keep him in that room. He could sign the agreement, take the check, and protect his own child from the worst consequences. Instead, Marcus stepped back from the door and raised both hands where everyone could see them. "Move it by hand. Put it in a shielded case. Bring in an independent examiner and record the transfer." Julian's mouth tightened. "You are risking your livelihood over a sound you barely heard. I'm protecting something that doesn't belong to me." Through the glass, Evelyn had arrived outside the interview room. Marcus could not hear her, but he saw her glance at the check, then at the evidence cart. He picked up the room's phone. Julian leaned forward. "Calling an attorney?" Marcus dialed the front desk. "I need one call." When the receptionist answered, he asked her to contact Ms. Alvarez, Nia's teacher, and tell her that Nia might need to be picked up by someone she knew. He gave the school's emergency code, then asked that his daughter not be questioned without a trusted adult present. Only after that did he hang up. Nia appeared at the far end of the glass wall, escorted by the receptionist. "Dad?" she called softly. "Are we still going home?" Marcus placed his palm against the window. "Yes, baby. It may just take a little longer." She pressed her smaller hand to the other side. He smiled for her, though the check on the table represented every fear he had not allowed into his voice. Evelyn watched the exchange without moving. Then her gaze fell to the jacket still around her shoulders, the one Marcus had given her while she struggled to breathe. He had offered warmth before knowing her name. He had protected her watch while being accused of stealing from her. Now he was using his only call to care. For his daughter instead of defending himself. Julian gathered the unsigned agreement. "Kindness is admirable, Mr. Reed, but it does not make you credible." Marcus looked at the watch as an officer finally placed it inside a shielded case. Under the clear lid, a faint engraving caught the fluorescent light. "Evelyn. When the room gets loud, listen." Evelyn stepped closer to the glass, reading the words her father had hidden beneath the cracked case. And for the first time, she wondered whether Marcus's refusal to save himself was the first honest piece of evidence she had seen all morning. "Open the case under camera," Evelyn said. "Use an outside examiner. That will delay the board review, Julian replied. Then delay it. The security room went still except for the fluorescent buzz above the table. Marcus remained behind the glass while the shielded case was carried into a smaller evidence lab, where a watchmaker from a nearby restoration firm and a forensic electronics specialist waited beneath two ceiling cameras. Evelyn stood at the observation window with Marcus's work jacket still around her shoulders. She had not apologized to him. She had not ordered his release. The recording had spoken her name, but a frightened mind could mistake a voice, and a skilled technician with access to executive elevators could have prepared more than he admitted. Julian made sure she remembered that. He knew where to press, he said quietly. He understood the mechanism immediately. You have to consider the possibility that this was designed for you to find. Evelyn watched Marcus through the glass. I am considering it. The examiner cut the evidence seal, photographed the cracked face, and placed the watch beneath a white inspection lamp. Every scratch became sharp under the light. The hands remained fixed at 8:17. The watchmaker removed the back plate with a calibrated tool and exposed the small voice capsule beneath the mechanical movement. This was not installed today, she said. The solder has oxidation. Several months, at least. Julian folded his arms. That does not tell us who installed it. No, Evelyn said. It doesn't. Marcus was brought inside but kept several feet from the table. The electronics specialist asked how he had recognized the hidden device. Marcus did not mention the Air Force or the years he had spent repairing avionics. He pointed toward the movement without touching it. Mechanical gears don't make a repeating electrical tick. And the activation point? I didn't know there was one until I saw the contact beneath the balance wheel. Julian leaned toward Evelyn. A convenient answer. Marcus looked at the clock on the wall, then at the frozen watch. May I ask one question? The examiner nodded. If the elevator lost power at 8:17, why did the mechanical controller keep recording? No one answered immediately. Marcus asked for the service logs from Elevator 6 and the security footage from the same time. Grant entered carrying a tablet, his polished shoes nearly silent on the rubber floor. There was a power surge on the service level 6 months ago, he said. It disrupted the cameras. Nothing unusual. Marcus studied the two displays placed side by side. The security video jumped from 8 hours 16 minutes and 39 seconds to 8 hours 17 minutes and 26 seconds, a missing span of 47 seconds. But the elevator controller showed uninterrupted voltage, normal brake pressure, and a single administrative door release command at 8 hours 17 minutes and 4 seconds. He did not point dramatically or accuse anyone. He simply turned the controller screen toward the light so the timestamp could be read clearly. Which system lost power? Grant's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Camera networks fail differently from mechanical controls. They do, Marcus said, but a building-wide surge leaves a trace on both. The room slowed around that sentence. Evelyn stepped closer to the monitors. 47 seconds were missing from the cameras. Yet the elevator had remained powered and responsive the entire time. Julian offered a measured explanation. A localized network reset, perhaps triggered by maintenance. It sounded reasonable until Grant added, the outage was confined to the service floor. The forensic specialist looked up. No one had yet identified which floor's footage contained the gap. Evelyn noticed it too. Her fingers closed around the edge of Marcus's jacket. She still did not know whether Marcus was innocent, but Grant had now described details that had not been shown to him. Marcus asked for the administrative token attached to the door release command. Grant objected that exposing security credentials could compromise the building. Julian supported him, warning Evelyn that opening internal systems during a leadership review could create legal risk. Evelyn said nothing for several seconds. Then she ordered the token isolated, copied, and examined without altering the original server. The result appeared as a short string of numbers beneath the 817 command. The credential belonged to Grant's office, but the release had been issued from a terminal on the executive legal floor, 48 stories above. Marcus stared at the terminal code, then at Julian's leather portfolio resting beside the transfer papers. Someone had needed Grant's authority and access to Julian's floor to erase those 47 seconds. The question was no longer whether the gap existed. It was who had been in both places at once. The terminal code belonged to the executive legal floor, and Julian Cross was the first person to suggest they stop looking. "We have enough to document an irregularity," he said. "There is no reason to turn a technical question into a public spectacle." Marcus studied the string of numbers on the monitor. Grant's security token had opened the door, but the command had been sent from a workstation under Julian's control. That did not prove who had touched the keyboard. It proved only that the missing 47 seconds had required access from two different departments. Evelyn rested one hand on the table beside the transfer papers. "Can the deletion be recreated?" The forensic specialist hesitated. "On a live system, that would be reckless." "Not on the live system," Marcus said. "There's a training controller in the mechanical lab." Julian gave him a patient smile. "And now the elevator technician would like to conduct a forensic demonstration."
"No," Marcus replied.
"I'd like the forensic examiner to record one." An hour remained before the board could invoke the emergency succession clause. They gave Marcus 10 minutes. The mechanical lab smelled of warm insulation, dust, and the sharp mineral scent of electrical contacts. A spare elevator controller stood open beneath white work lights, its rows of relays exposed behind a clear safety shield. Two board members watched from the doorway. Julian stood beside Evelyn with his leather portfolio tucked beneath one arm. Grant remained near the wall, outwardly calm, though his thumb kept rubbing the edge of his security badge. Marcus asked a young building technician named Luis to load the archived camera software while the independent examiner copied every screen. "Use Grant's test token," Julian said. "Show us the gap." "First we establish the source," Marcus answered. "Then we touch the record." 10 minutes, Mr. Reed." "I heard you." Marcus connected the training controller to an isolated terminal and reproduced the 817 door release command. The system accepted Grant's token but refused to create a camera gap. A second credential window appeared, requesting authorization from the executive legal network. The air conditioner clicked on above them. No one spoke. Julian adjusted his cuff. That could be a software artifact. Marcus did not argue. He entered a dummy legal credential supplied by the examiner. The camera feed froze. A timer appeared in the corner. 47 seconds. Evelyn's fingers slowly left the transfer documents. One of the board members stopped dragging a chair across the floor. Even the fluorescent hum seemed louder. "There," the examiner said. "The deletion requires both credentials." Grant stepped forward. "Which only proves someone misused my token." "That's possible," Marcus said. He did not look at Grant when he said it. He was watching the lower relay bank, where a yellow safety light had begun blinking out of sequence. Luis leaned closer to check the connection. Marcus saw his sleeve slip past the clear shield toward an energized contact. "Back up. I'm not touching anything." "Luis, back up now." Julian glanced at the timer. "You have 50 seconds left." Marcus reached for the emergency cutoff and killed the entire demonstration. The screens went black. The relays released with a heavy metallic clack. Luis stepped away, pale, and looked down at the scorched thread on his cuff where it had brushed the edge of the panel. "The test was nearly complete," Julian said. His voice stayed controlled, but the warmth had left it. Marcus checked Luis's hand before answering. "A test that hurts someone proves the wrong thing." Through the lab's glass wall, Nia sat beside the receptionist with her red backpack on her knees. She had been watching Marcus's face more than the machinery. When she saw Luis flex his uninjured fingers, some of the fear left her shoulders. The forensic examiner restored power and opened the training controller's temporary memory. Although Marcus had stopped the test, the system had already captured the credential path. Grant's token had initiated the door release. The legal floor workstation had authorized the camera deletion. The code matched the terminal outside Julian's private records office. No one laughed now. No one called Marcus merely an elevator technician. Julian closed his portfolio. This should be handled privately before people draw conclusions that damage the company. Evelyn looked at him differently, not with certainty, but with the caution people reserve for a door they once believed was locked. She ordered the original servers preserved, the footage copied, and every deletion request frozen. Then she asked for the watch. Under 2 cameras, Marcus placed it on a white cloth and arranged the tiny screws in a straight line. He turned the hands carefully to 817 and attached an external power lead. "Once it starts," he said, stepping back, "nobody touches it." The red waveform returned. Static filled the lab, followed by Charles Whitmore's tired voice. "Find Marcus Reed," he said, "the elevator technician who refused to leave me behind." Evelyn's hand stopped above the table. Julian's face did not change, but Grant looked toward the exit. Marcus stared at the cracked watch. Hearing his own name spoken by a dead man he had never known was powerful. And beneath Charles's voice, almost hidden by the static, came the faint chime of a service elevator opening at exactly 8:17. The service elevator chime beneath Charles Whitmore's voice was soft enough that everyone almost missed it. Marcus did not. He leaned toward the sealed speaker, listening as the recording dissolved into static, then looked across the lab at the bank of elevator controls mounted behind the glass. "That chime came from the old service car," he said. Julian closed his portfolio. "Or from any elevator recorded anywhere. Not that one." Marcus pointed to the faded brass indicator above the training panel. "It rings twice before the doors open. They replaced that system last winter." Evelyn studied him. "You remember a sound from 6 months ago?" "I remember machines when something around them isn't right." Marcus asked for access to the archived maintenance records, not the company database Julian's office controlled, but the carbon copy logbook stored in the basement mechanical room. Grant objected immediately. "Those records are obsolete." "Then they cannot threaten anyone," Marcus said. The basement archive smelled of paper dust, old grease, and cold concrete. Rows of gray cabinets stood beneath pipes wrapped in flaking insulation. Marcus opened the 3rd drawer from the bottom and removed a narrow black notebook with curled corners. He turned to the date stamped 6 months earlier. The carbon copy beneath his original service report was faint but readable. Service Car 4 held at 8:17 p.m. Safety bypass denied while personnel remained below. 3 night cleaning employees had been working in the lower shaft corridor. A senior office had demanded that Marcus override the lock so executives would not be delayed leaving a private reception. Marcus had refused. The delay earned him a written warning. Beside the entry was a second note in unfamiliar handwriting. "Correct decision. C. Whitmore." The printer in the corner stopped humming. No one spoke for several seconds. Evelyn lifted the page carefully, as though the pressure of her fingers might erase her father's name. "He never signed maintenance logs." Marcus looked at the initials. "I didn't know it was him." He explained only what the record could support. An older man in a worn brown coat had been trapped inside the service elevator during the delay. He carried no executive badge and never asked to be treated differently. Marcus had stayed until the cleaning crew cleared the lower corridor, then manually released the car. The man asked why Marcus risked a disciplinary mark for workers whose names he did not know. Marcus had answered that a locked door did not become safe because important people were waiting. Julian gave a controlled sigh. "A handwritten initial does not establish identity." Evelyn did not argue. She asked her assistant to retrieve a photograph from Charles's personal files. When it appeared on the tablet, Marcus recognized the silver ring, the heavy scar crossing the right thumb, and the coat folded over Charles's arm. He opened another envelope from the archive. Inside was the handwritten service receipt the older man had signed after Marcus refused payment. The signature matched the one on Charles Whitmore's corporate filings. Marcus could have held the page up in Julian's face. He could have named every insult spoken in the lobby and demanded an apology. Instead, he placed the receipt into a clear evidence sleeve. "Have the handwriting examiner confirm it," he said, "and preserve the original." Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. He was not using her father's attention to elevate himself. He was making the evidence harder to attack. The watchmaker then transmitted an invoice located through the capsule's serial number. Charles had brought the watch in the morning after the elevator incident. His instructions were typed beneath the repair notes. Preserve the mechanical stop at 8:17. Do not remove the audio housing. Release only to Charles Whitmore or Evelyn Whitmore. Attached to the invoice was a calendar confirmation from an independent attorney. Charles had met that attorney at 8:17 the same evening to revoke Julian's transfer authority. Julian's face remained composed, but a bead of sweat appeared near his temple. A revocation can be superseded, he said. We need to avoid creating a constitutional crisis inside this company based on sentimental artifacts. Evelyn turned toward him. You told me no revocation existed. I said there was no valid revocation. Before she could answer, the forensic accountant's phone vibrated against the metal table. He opened a preliminary transaction map. Several pension fund transfers had moved through layered consulting accounts into a company beginning with the letter A. Astron was a legitimate investment, Ethan said from the doorway. Every head turned. The accountant had not spoken the company's full name. Ethan's hand tightened around his phone. Julian mentioned it before. Julian looked at him, and for the first time the kindness left his expression completely. Marcus saw the pattern forming. Altered security footage, a forged disciplinary trail, a hidden revocation, and money removed from accounts belonging to employees who would never sit in the boardroom. Evelyn saw it too. She closed her father's notebook and ordered an emergency meeting with independent counsel, the audit committee, and a worker representative present. Julian reminded her that the board could vote on her fitness to lead in 22 minutes. Evelyn lifted the cracked watch from the table. Then they can hear why my father stopped trusting you. Behind the glass, the executive elevators began rising toward the 48th floor. The truth had grown too large for a private room, and someone was already preparing to destroy Marcus's name before he could carry it upstairs. The executive elevator opened onto the 48th floor with a soft brass chime, and Marcus Reed stepped into a hallway built to make ordinary people lower their voices. Frosted glass walls framed the boardroom. Beyond them, 12 directors sat beneath recessed lights while a live feed carried the meeting to the marble atrium below, the same place where Marcus had been searched in front of his daughter. He entered without his tool belt, his work shirt creased from hours in security, the faint smell of machine oil still clinging to his sleeves. The cracked watch rested inside a sealed evidence case in the independent attorney's hands. Evelyn walked ahead of Marcus but did not speak for him. She took her chair at the head of the table, placed her father's carbon log beside the transfer papers, and waited to see who would lie when everyone was watching. Julian. Cross rose with measured concern. No one here questions Ms. Whitmore's grief, he began. But grief can make manipulation feel like rescue. He displayed 3 items on the main screen. First came the watch enlarged beneath white forensic light. Then the 8:17 maintenance record Marcus had preserved. Finally, an email addressed to Julian from Marcus's company account. The subject line read, $5 million or the recording goes public. A murmur moved through the boardroom. Down in the atrium, employees stopped beneath the screen. Nia stood behind Ms. Alvarez, one hand holding her teacher's sleeve, her red backpack resting between her shoes. She did not understand the legal language, but she understood her father's name above a demand for money. Dad didn't write that, she whispered. Ms. Alvarez squeezed her hand. Julian enlarged the digital signature. The message was authenticated through Mr. Reed's employee credentials. It demanded payment in exchange for the watch, the elevator logs, and silence. For several seconds, it looked as though the entire story had turned against Marcus. Evelyn's eyes moved from the email to him. She had evidence that her father trusted Marcus, but trust was not immunity. Marcus did not ask her to believe him. He placed his phone, access badge, and written consent form on the table. Image everything, he said. My devices, my account, the server. Preserve the originals. Julian tilted his head sympathetically. That is admirable confidence after the fact. Marcus looked at the board, not at Julian. I'm not here to protect my name by burying another record. The independent forensic examiner connected Marcus's phone to an isolated reader. While the system worked, Evelyn introduced the evidence in order. The watch's serial number matched Charles's repair invoice. The invoice preserved the mechanical stop at 8:17. The service controller showed Grant's token opening the elevator while a legal floor terminal erased 47 seconds of camera footage. Julian responded without raising his voice. Grant's credential could have been copied. A shared legal terminal could have been accessed by maintenance staff. The carbon log, he argued, proved only that Marcus once met Charles, not that Julian stole anything or forged the email. Several directors nodded. His explanation was careful enough to sound responsible. Then the examiner's screen changed. The email was sent from Mr. Reed's account, she said. But the draft was created at 10:42 this morning from workstation L48-07. Evelyn turned toward the legal department's seating area. Whose workstation is that? No one answered immediately. Julian's private records assistant slowly lowered her eyes. The examiner continued. At 10:42, Mr. Reed was already inside the security interview room. Camera footage places him there continuously. The air conditioning became suddenly audible. Marcus had not been near the 48th floor. He had not possessed his badge or phone. The draft had been created 37 minutes after Grant confiscated both. Julian recovered first. Then someone used the workstation to frame both the company and me. Maybe, Marcus said. So lock the server before that person gets another chance. Evelyn ordered a company-wide legal hold. Every deletion, transfer, and remote login was frozen. Grant reached toward his tablet. The public feed should be suspended until the board understands the implications. Leave it on, Evelyn said. Grant's thumb hovered above the control. On the atrium screen, the camera angle shifted toward the ceiling for half a second before returning. The forensic examiner looked at her console. Someone just attempted to terminate the stream using Chief Mercer's administrative token. Grant lowered the tablet. The employee representative at the table requested that the attempted interruption be entered into the official record. Evelyn approved it. Next came the disciplinary report Julian had used to portray Marcus as unstable and insubordinate. The digital approval carried Charles Whitmore's signature. For one brief moment, Julian seemed relieved. Then the auditor enlarged the timestamp. Charles had supposedly approved the report 3 days after his death. No one moved. Marcus could see his own reflection in the dark boardroom glass. Tired, empty-handed, still wearing the shirt the guards had searched. He did not smile. He did not look toward the atrium to see who now believed him. This isn't about embarrassing anyone, he said. It's about making sure the truth doesn't get buried a second time. Evelyn reached for the sealed evidence case. The independent attorney placed the repair invoice, the notarized revocation, and Charles's verified voice sample beside it. Julian's mask of concern finally tightened at the edges. Evelyn, once you play that file publicly, you cannot undo the damage. She set the cracked watch in the center of the table, turned its frozen hands toward 8:17, and looked through the glass wall at the employees waiting below. That depends, she said, on who caused it. Marcus connected the forensic power lead, withdrew both hands, and stepped back as the red waveform appeared beneath the cracked face. This time, the recording was about to play without anyone in Julian's system controlling where it stopped. The red waveform steadied beneath the cracked watch face, and Charles Whitmore's voice filled the boardroom. Evelyn, do not sign anything Julian Cross puts before you. No one shifted in their chair. Even the projector fan seemed to soften as the dead man continued. At 8:17 on October 14th, I revoked every transfer authority granted to Julian Cross. The signed original is held outside Whitmore Financial with independent counsel. Compare it to the elevator record, the watch repair invoice, and the Astron transactions. Julian's fingers tightened around the edge of his portfolio. This recording has not been authenticated, he said, but his voice came out dry. The independent attorney placed Charles's notarized revocation beside the watch. The date matched the appointment calendar. The repair invoice matched the capsule's serial number and confirmed that Charles had ordered the mechanism preserved months before his death. A voice analyst displayed the comparison between the recording and Charles's verified legal deposition. The waveforms aligned across the screen. "Probability of a match exceeds the court-admissible threshold," she said. Julian looked toward the camera, then away. Charles's voice continued. "If the security footage is missing, inspect the mechanical controller. A machine records what frightened men try to erase." The examiner brought up the 817 logs. Grant's token had opened the service elevator. Julian's legal floor workstation had authorized the 47-second camera deletion. The board watched the two records move across the screen in parallel, their timestamps locking together second by second. Grant's tablet slipped slightly in his hand. Down in the atrium, Nia stood behind Ms. Alvarez and watched her father on the large screen. When the examiner confirmed Marcus had been confined in the security room when the extortion email was drafted, the little girl released a breath she had been holding and wrapped both hands around one strap of her backpack. Charles's recording moved into its final section. "Marcus Reed did not know who I was when he kept that elevator locked. He could have saved his job by bypassing the safety system while 3 night workers remained below. He chose their lives over the comfort of men whose names were on the building." Evelyn lowered her eyes to the carbon service report. Marcus's handwritten words remained visible beneath the glass. "No bypass while personnel remain below." The archive timestamp, Charles's initials, and the signed service receipt confirmed the entry had existed 6 months before that morning. Charles spoke again. "I trusted him because he protected people whose names you never learned." A pen fell from Ethan's hand and struck the polished table. The small sound carried through the room. The forensic accountant opened the Astron ownership records. Layered shell companies led back to accounts controlled by Julian and Ethan. Pension money had been moved through consulting payments and disguised as temporary investments. Ethan reached for his phone. Before his thumb touched the screen, the legal hold system sounded a quiet alert. His device had just attempted to send a remote deletion command to an Astron account. He placed the phone down without speaking. Julian rose slowly. "Evelyn, this company cannot survive decisions made under emotional pressure." She looked at the transfer document in front of her. "You prepared this before the elevator doors opened. For continuity. You used my panic attack to question my capacity. You altered employee records. You framed a man while his daughter watched." Julian opened his mouth, but the auditor replaced the screen with Marcus's disciplinary report. Charles's digital approval appeared beneath it, dated 3 days after Charles had died. No explanation remained that could hold all the evidence together. The room went silent. Through the glass walls, the lights of Chicago burned against the darkening sky. Someone's phone vibrated once and stopped. Marcus stood near the end of the table with his hands resting loosely at his sides. He did not smile. He did not look at Julian. Evelyn tore the transfer document in half and instructed independent counsel to place the company under a full legal hold. Julian and Ethan were suspended from all board authority pending outside investigation. Grant's access credentials were revoked, and security was ordered to preserve every device and escort him from restricted areas without public spectacle. The Astron transfers were frozen so the pension funds could not be moved again. "Keep the records clean," Marcus said when several directors began talking at once. "Apologies can wait." Evelyn looked toward the atrium feed, where Nia was staring up at her father. The truth had protected the company and cleared Marcus's name, but it had not yet returned what had been taken from him in that lobby. Now that everyone finally saw his worth, the question was what Marcus would allow their recognition to change, and what he would refuse to let it buy. The boardroom emptied without applause. Directors gathered their papers in silence while outside counsel sealed laptops, collected phones, and posted written notices preserving every record connected to Julian, Ethan, Grant, and Astron. No one was marched past the cameras. No one was allowed to erase what had happened, either. Marcus rode down to the atrium with Evelyn and the independent attorney, the cracked watch resting inside its clear evidence case. When the elevator doors opened, the employees who had watched him place his hands against the Glass stepped aside. Nia broke from Ms. Alvarez only after her teacher nodded. She ran the few safe steps to Marcus and wrapped both arms around his waist. "Are we going home now?" she asked. Marcus rested his hand over her red backpack. "Yeah, baby, we're going home." Evelyn approached them slowly, still wearing the work jacket Marcus had placed behind her shoulders in the elevator. "Mr. Reed," she said, "what happened to you in this lobby was wrong." Marcus glanced at the cameras above the security gates. "Then correct the record before you correct the story." She did. 3 weeks later, the preliminary independent report confirmed that the extortion email had been fabricated. Marcus's disciplinary history had been altered, and pension funds had been routed through Astron without proper disclosure. Julian and Ethan remained suspended while civil claims and criminal inquiries moved forward. Grant was terminated for manipulating security data, interfering with evidence preservation, and detaining Marcus without following company procedure. The pension transfers were frozen, then returned through court-supervised recovery. Marcus's termination was voided. His lost wages were restored under company policy, not offered as charity. Every accusation was removed from his personnel file, and a written correction was entered into the permanent corporate record. Evelyn gathered employees in the glass atrium where Marcus had been searched. There was no stage, no music, and no oversized check. Marcus stood in the same charcoal work shirt, his brown leather tool roll at his side. Nia waited beside Ms. Alvarez near the front, close enough to see him but free from the burden of speaking for him. Evelyn read the correction aloud. Then she apologized, not for misunderstanding a sound in an elevator, but for leading a system that had decided a working man's dignity was less important than protecting powerful people from discomfort. When she finished, the lobby remained quiet. Marcus did not ask anyone to clap. He looked toward the night custodians standing near the service corridor and asked that the investigation review every disciplinary case touched by Julian's office. He requested independent evidence procedures, protection for whistleblowers, and a rule requiring a trusted adult to remain with any child whose parent was detained at work. Evelyn offered him a newly created executive title. Marcus declined it. "A title made for one man can disappear with one man," he said. He agreed instead to apply through an independent process for Director of Safety Integrity, reporting to the Audit Committee rather than to Evelyn. He wanted the authority to stop unsafe work, preserve records, and protect employees who did the right thing when doing it cost them something. Before the watch was returned, Marcus repaired its mechanical movement at a small table beneath the restoration shop's white lamp. He replaced the worn spring but left the narrow crack in the glass. At 8:17, the hands hesitated. Then the second hand crossed the mark and continued. Evelyn watched without speaking. "You could replace the crystal," she said. Marcus closed his tool roll. "It still tells the truth with the crack." She fastened the watch around her wrist. For the first time since her father's death, it moved forward. 6 months later, the recovered pension money had been returned, several wrongfully disciplined employees had been reinstated, and the first class of single parents entered Whitmore's technical training program. Marcus had earned the integrity position through the same interview and review process required of every candidate. He no longer reported to Evelyn, and neither of them pretended the distance between their worlds had vanished. After the program's opening ceremony, Evelyn found Marcus beside the elevator while Nia showed Ms. Alvarez a drawing from school. "Would you have coffee with me sometime?" Evelyn asked. "Not as your CEO." Marcus studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Coffee is a start." Nia returned and slipped her hand into his. Her eyes moved to the watch on Evelyn's wrist. "Is it moving now?" Marcus listened to the soft ticking between them. "Yeah," he said. "It finally is." The elevator arrived, and for a few seconds none of them stepped inside. The silence was no longer filled with suspicion or fear. It held the simple understanding that Marcus had possessed dignity before anyone important recognized it, and that kindness, like the old watch, had never stopped carrying the truth. It had only been waiting for someone brave enough to let it move forward.